Tom Cruise isn't, but I think his age.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started here. I realize some of you might be finishing up the pre-quiz, which is fine. And again, you need to have your guided note sheet open, which has just been posted on Google Classroom. Today, we're going to be talking about Chapter 1 in Founding Brothers. That was the requirement that you needed to read the chapter before coming into the discussion group so that you can participate in the discussion as we've done in the past. This is your first attempt at a historian's take on the actual events of the duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. So instead of a primary source where we've done in the past with things like Washington's farewell address, with things like Model of Christian Charity by John Winthrop, now we're turning towards what Joseph J. Ellis believes about American history and specifically the events of the duel between Burr and Hamilton. So you're getting a second-hand account by a historian. So we're going to talk a little bit about his perspective in a bit here. But to give you the background here of why these guys ended up on the plains of Weehawken, you need to understand who these people are. So if you don't understand kind of the background, and I realize that some of you may be fans of the musical that is based on Hamilton's life, and so therefore you've been at least introduced to the cast of characters surrounding this event. But to understand who these guys are, just some historical background, they couldn't be more different. Aaron Burr is an elite guy. He's somebody that was born into a very prominent family. His grandfather on his mother's side was the preacher Jonathan Edwards. If you remember when we talked about the Great Awakening, we talked about sinners in the hands of an angry God. That's the preacher, the guy that basically said, "You're all spiders hanging over the pits of hell." You know, he basically embodied that kind of fire and brimstone preaching from the early 1700s. Well, it's not surprising that that kind of steely resolve was also passed down genetically to Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr was a rising star in New York politics all the way through the late 1700s. And he had been somebody that had served with General Washington during the American Revolution. He had been somebody that had served in multiple posts throughout the New York state legislature. So the guy was a very prominent figure in New York politics, and for that matter, national politics, as we started to progress past Washington and into Adams and Jefferson's terms of office. Now, of course, he already had by that point a reputation as being somewhat duplicitous, that he was kind of playing for whatever team gave him the best odds of succeeding. But this is where I need to kind of give the background that political parties are not really formed yet. It's political ideologies, okay? Political ideologies are the idea that, Jefferson and his party really just had a set of beliefs. They had a specific subset of beliefs where they believed in yeoman farmers, they believed in the Western ideals, they believed in the frontier, they believed that France was the best friend of the United States. All the things that have been part of your presentations leading up to this Zoom call, that's what the Democratic Republicans of Jefferson believed. Now, is that really a political party? Not really, not in the modern day sense, okay? On the flip side, you had the Federalists, okay? And the Federalists, of course, are people that are, behind not just Washington, but in reality run by people like Alexander Hamilton, people that believed in national control of both politics and of the economy, people that believed that, the pooling of debt into a national debt would actually work out well for the group. The use of debt could actually help you in the long run to secure funds from international revenue sources, like going to France, going to England, going to Denmark, going to the Netherlands, asking for loans in order to further your national cause. So, I mean, Hamilton is very much into centralized control to show that the national government was truly in charge, okay? And again, that's kind of a more federalist mentality. But to say that they're the modern day political parties like the Democrats and Republicans now, it's a far cry from that. They are not organized that way to run candidates. Still, to go against your principles and your ideology was considered to be less than reputable. And so, not surprisingly, as we discussed this week in the presentations, when Burr, who is classified as a Federalist during the 1790s, switches sides, so to speak, and runs with Jefferson as a Democratic Republican, people like Hamilton are not going to take too kindly to that. And so there are going to be some hurt feelings. There are going to be feelings that this guy is a traitor to the cause, if you will, switching sides like that. And especially since in reality, it's not like he switched it because he had this moment of clarity when he said, oh man, the policies and the ideas of Jefferson are so much better than Hamilton, and I want to switch over and follow Jefferson. People like Hamilton are going to charge Burr as being duplicitous because he only switched because maybe he could get another government job being a Democratic Republican. Maybe it was more beneficial, okay? So, and this is usually kind of held as being, someone with no principles and no scruples whatsoever in politics for somebody to just switch sides like this. What would cause somebody, if you're a lifelong Democrat in modern day sense, would you switch over to the Republican Party? It would have to be something pretty severe, like a candidate that you just couldn't follow, or a switch on a policy procedure. So for example, if in modern day politics, if somebody was maybe a lifelong opponent of abortion and was a registered Republican because the Republicans were the party of pro-life, and then all of a sudden a group of candidates took over the Republican Party that basically said, we're not going to worry about abortion anymore, we're going to allow it, and the Democrats take up and say, well, wait a minute, we don't want it anymore. That would be a shift of policies. And we're going to talk about the shift in policies where people are going to make massive jumps as groups throughout American history. You are going to see this happen from time to time. Okay, but again, it's not a common everyday occurrence. This is not something that happens all the time. So in the end, what we're talking about here is a shift in mentality, but in reality, a shift in principles by Aaron Burr that causes and ruffles the feathers of people like Hamilton. Now, who's Hamilton? Hamilton's just the opposite. He doesn't come from a storied family in America, from the colonies. He comes from St. Croix, a small little island in the West Indies, where he had been born basically out of wedlock. So when they call him a bastard, that's what they mean by that. That's the original meaning of the term. He had been born to a mother of ill repute. We're still not sure what her actual job is, but there were a lot of people that made charges that his mother was a prostitute, or at least someone that had less than stellar sets of morals. Which of course are going to call into question Hamilton and his own morals later on. But he basically was born penniless. He was kicked around, if you will, and he had a really rough life. His dad walks out. His mom basically only lasts until he's a teenager. His brother gets sick too, and doesn't do well. So Hamilton really has to grow up fast and become an adult way too fast. Now, he shows an unbelievable propensity to make money for his employers. He gets a job basically running the company, and he's only, again, about your age when this is going on, where he's running companies, he's running a shipping yard, and he's making money in this trade very, kind of hand over fist. And they realize that he is way more talented than what he is doing at St. Croix. So they send him up to New York to get his education. And of course, as soon as he arrives at a place called King's College, which is now Columbia, the American Revolution breaks out. And instead of going to school and getting his economics degree and continuing his studies, instead, Hamilton is kind of forced into the politics of the American Revolution, and he embraces it full go, becomes a revolutionary, and eventually serves on Washington's staff as his kind of aide-de-camp. And that's where he gets his connectivity to Washington. He starts to get elevated in New York politics. And that's the key, is both of these guys are elevated in New York politics. Both of these guys are well entrenched. Now, the key to this whole scenario here is that Hamilton's kind of apex of his power and influence was during Washington's time in office. Because he was Treasury Secretary, because he could influence the assumption of debt program, he could influence the National Bank, he really had the most power when he was under Washington. Hamilton still wanted more. He played politics, and he lost during Adams' time in office. He basically was kind of cast aside, and the Federalists had moved on without him and kind of allowed him to play behind the scenes roles. So is he really a high-level person at the time of this duel? He's really not. Okay, and as Ellis argues in the book, he's not really somebody that has a long storied future ahead of him. He's somebody that is kind of at the end of his political relevance. At the same time, if you remember from our presentations this week, Aaron Burr had been rising through the ranks, became vice president, but because he challenged Jefferson in 1800, on the legitimacy of whether or not he's president, he has fallen out of favor with the Democratic Republicans. They don't like him very much, and they know, and he knows, in 1804, he's not going to be the vice presidential candidate under Jefferson again. They're going to find a replacement. So what does he do? He runs for the governorship of New York, and he loses. And instead of kind of looking at maybe his political career and saying, well, what kind of decisions did I make that put me in a position where I lost the governor's race in New York? He instead blames Hamilton. Okay, and that's kind of the crux of where we are in regards to the duel. So what I'm going to ask you all to do, there is the little sheet on Google Classroom that is asking you very specific questions. They're discussion questions, and we've kind of done this before, but I want to make sure you understand how this works. When I kick you out to discussion groups, I want every person in the group to take at least one of those questions and answer them, and I want you to do it as a discussion group. So going through to model again what we do here, when I kick you out to discussion groups, what I want you guys to do, and you're all going to fill out your own form. You're filling out your own notes to each one of these questions. For the first question on there, it's going to ask you basically about, what, why did this duel happen, basically. Okay. Somebody in the group somebody in the group is going to say, you know what, I'll take that one, and they answer that question for the whole group. You write down kind of what that person talks about. You can add in little things here and there when that person is done talking. So for example, if I'm in a group with Megan Carroll and I start answering the question, Megan is then going to kind of kick in some extra stuff that maybe I forgot at the end, but all of you should write that Mr. V answered this one. You just kind of write my name in the box, that I'm the one that's answering this, and writing down kind of, my answer to the question. Number two, Megan may say, you know what, I'm going to take this one because I feel pretty solid about this. And then she answers that question. It's so that everybody in the group is participating. Now, you may have somebody in your group that full well didn't answer the question very well because they probably didn't read, okay? Or they didn't quite understand it and they're just kind of talking to talk. You have every right on the form to kind of say, the answer that they gave was wrong, here's the real answer, and kind of correct it. Be nice, be friendly, be academic, but again, you don't have to put up with somebody that didn't read. If you are somebody in the group right now that didn't read, that didn't quite understand it, just admit it to your group and move on. All right, so again, this is kind of how you're going to work here. You're going to work as groups to try and answer these questions. And most of your groups have 5 people in them, okay? You've been assigned 2 groups. There's only one group that I think has 6 members. As always, when I kick you out to the group, if you have questions, you can certainly raise your hand within the group, and I will come into the group and answer any and all questions or fill in some gaps. And I'll drop in from time to time on groups just to check in, see how you guys are doing. We're going to do this for about 20 minutes. So right now it's 10:20. So by 10:40, I'll be pulling you back out here. So 20 minutes to answer those questions. Again, if you have questions, you can hang back and ask in the lobby area, basically, of the Zoom call, or again, you can raise your hands when you're together, okay? All right, folks.
Okay, I have really good people. Thank God. Oh my God. Thank God. I have really good people. Wait, so I read. Why are all your cameras off? Because I turned on. Okay,
What do you mean? I'm sorry, Megan. What? You're missing your 2 remote people, basically.
There's your faces. Okay, so, group members. Okay. Okay. I'm writing. So we are group number 2. So the first question we have Lexi, we have Cameron. Have a great group.
I'm glad it worked out for you.
It's such a great group. Thank you.
Wait a second.
Okay, so I have the first one. Kylia, you have the second one. And there's 7 questions. Yeah, you're gonna go to the box. And then we're gonna do 2.
I don't recommend.
So 1, 2, 3. Who has 3? Is it gonna be Cameron? Cameron. Hello.
So, who wants to take one question?
You're both in the same.
Are you doing the third one?
Well, that,
And Megan is too.
that's not good.
So third one is Cameron. Fourth one is who again? Natalie. And the fifth one is Lexi. And then what? So the duel occurred because Hamilton decided to call for this festival or whatever, and basically Hamilton is burning underground for an emergency death, so we're decided to call it duel. And
If that's the worst that you
Hamilton
do, all.
couldn't say no, so the duel occurred because he wanted to
Yeah,
call
somebody did something funny and you had a hard time.
and not.
Yes.
Okay, so
No,
like,
so now we're on.
put yourself full go into this group and we'll call it even.
All right, got it.
Okay, I'll take that one.
How do you spell it?
Eight for. Are we sharing?
Just take one and put your name on it. Yeah, and we're all
Yes, I
going
know the
up.
answer to the question, but I thought the person was doing like one question.
And then we're all gonna say our answers as we go. So that's, yeah.
So each of us are gonna turn in a document with one
Yeah,
question.
so hold on, I'm finishing it. Wait, we're actually working the
Okay.
answers now and then we can all come back and then share.
Piece of dirt.
Randy,
It'll be
I'm
fast.
sorry.
professional academic language.
Okay.
Got it.
Do the last one.
What? I am muted. Am I? I thought, oh, sorry guys. I thought I was muted.
Or you can do this. You still have to wait for it. So you can do that one. Hey guys.
So you can do that as a group.
Guess what's happening?
You want to make somebody individually responsible.
Hey.
The bigger one is the perspective of that person. We're going to come back to that one.
Natalie, was that you? Okay. I'll wait. Oh, okay. Cameron, are you with us?
I remember
So we're waiting on Natalie.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, you guys were
We're waiting on you
unfairly
too.
influenced by a previous
Oh, okay then, Lexi. You just were in the combo.
meaning I had already told you the answer to the question.
Okay.
She didn't have to read you already.
I'll share first and I'll go slow because
Thanks
you
for
guys
that.
have to write down.
I gave you a 2 out of 20 automatic.
You got all the
The duel,
No,
everyone listening?
Okay, so nobody listen to the
Title of your autobiography.
girl, stop. I need.
A girl.
Girl.
I need the grade.
Okay. You can if you want, or you can just do the
Shut
rest of it, but don't make me look bad. Okay, the duel occurred because Emerson was right sleeping around and saying the word, like stepping all about bird. And during that time, I was not saying musician say bird inside, like you're saying, bird is
Why do I need to mute myself?
can't say bird, because
Hey, Sanam, why are we late getting in? Did we just get here or we at home? What's going on?
My computer didn't work.
I'm sorry?
My computer didn't work. My,
Okay, so you had computer issues. All right, I'm gonna put you into a group real quick. All right, they're in the middle of filling out the assignment that's on Google Classroom. So when I put you in the group, they may be fairly advanced on the questions. So try and catch up as best you can and see if you can't answer one of the questions while you're in the group. You still have 12 minutes in group, so you should have time to kind of help out with that, okay? So let me assign you to a group real quick.
okay.
that was
Hey, folks, Sanam had to join late because of computer issues. So I'm not sure which platform you're on, but just kind of allow him to duck in and answer one of the questions as necessary. So not his fault. He had some computer issues trying to get in. So just want to let you know. You have any questions, concerns?
no.
While I'm in here, Matthias, when we're all done with this Zoom meeting, can you hang back? When I dismiss everybody, can you hang back? I need to talk to you real quick, okay?
Sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Is that recording like this big?
Yes. You want to wait? Hi, Mr. Powell.
Oh my god.
I know.
I guess that is what.
Oh, that's not the first question.
It's me. Oh, right.
How you doing? Guess what, Mr. B? I'm done.
Okay, I'm ready.
Mr. B, can you read my answer? I feel like.
Oh,
You're
that's
all
Yes, sir.
Okay, is it already?
I need you.
You know
I
what?
got this. I want to question this here, so.
Hey,
I
guys.
don't know how to.
Okay, I'm ready for that. That's
Okay, so who got the first
Yeah.
question?
Okay, so how did they avoid this? Did they have to meet?
Oh, shut up.
So guys, who got the first question?
And like.
Certainly. certainly, because what was he accusing?
You know what, let's just copy and paste our questions into the chat and say question one.
So you remember what it is when somebody says something that's untrue about
Okay,
you?
good job.
Well, there's a legal term for that, called slander. Okay, so could he have sued him for slander, saying, hey, you said something about me that's not true, and I want you held accountable? He would have to prove, and this was the part that was kind of hard, he would have to prove that insult affected his political ambitions. According to him, he lost the election for governorship because of that insult.
Because he did things that.
Can you really prove that? Can you prove that people heard the insults and want to vote for that guy? That'd be up to a jury. But yeah, you're not too far off that, hey, they could have settled it legally. So, taking a gun.
It's very.
You know,
Dial up.
being right style thinking, you know, that.
I'm on it.
Thank you. I'm not gonna share off of mine. If it's wrong, don't hurt my feelings.
I updated my answer.
I'm ready.
I don't know. Emma, you did number 2. You answered already? Oh my god. She can't type it. Do you want her, do you want her to read it or type it into the chat? He said you can do either one here, then.
Who's doing the overlay major?
Dude, turn that computer down. Oh my god.
Alyssa, which question?
I'm gonna say that it could have been avoided because both of their egos.
Okay, so now we have 2 more questions, which I think we should all do our votes together. What were the
That's
major
just like the
impacts of
summary.
the other time and in American history?
Oh, she's right here, never mind. Okay, did anybody do good impact?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait.
Is Joseph J. Ellis correct
Your answer first. Oh, you're from the.
in his historical interpretation and conclusion
question
of the
did you
chapter?
have?
Yes, and what was the no?
Okay, okay, so. Wait, I'm gonna. One, 2. Okay, you did this one, the last one, right?
I did the last one, the second, the last.
That wasn't like word.
So he did 3. So the answer that you put in here.
So, Mr. Are we sharing?
Okay.
So basically,
I mean,
that's
Are we
confusion
gonna-
we'll
about
share it.
the
We don't have a
chapter
ton of time
was,
to
you
do
can't
it.
really know because
But yeah, I'll be silly.
the other side of the story
Alright, I'll share my answer.
is dead.
You can
But
look,
feel free to
So
volunteer.
you're gonna get both sides.
let me hear it.
I think he interprets.
Oh,
he
you gotta
doesn't
hold
like
it.
he's gonna like the.
Which one?
So yes, yes.
Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We're giving you better, Josh.
Is Burr a murderer?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I didn't do a super long answer, but it's it answers the question.
It was right.
oh.
Seriously, really?
Okay, so we need to do, who is the blank?
Yes, you
Did you put it in the chat? Okay, and then we have to do.
number 2, I put it could not have been. Or number 2, I said it could not have been avoided because both of them had inflated.
Dude, aren't you quarantined? How are you doing good?
Well, it was actually Emily's question. I can summarize. See, yeah. I just summarized your question, okay? Don't get butthurt over it.
And it
What?
better not be a better one.
Yeah, you have one? Got him. Got him.
My
You don't have to jump on it.
brother of the
Crap.
at his private fine, they said, I don't know what's going on with these problems.
Pete Schwiggle.
Hello.
Oh, this is in here? Oh, hi. Oh, this is not even in here. I just said hi to nobody. I just look like a stupid person.
Okay, which version? Oh, that's right.
I don't know.
Who?
I can't even.
Who?
He's not saying.
Who?
He said we were right. We were right.
Y'all said it.
2 minutes.
Who is it?
Yeah, you better hurry.
Bro, let's.
You have to redo this. I'm not taking.
Who is it?
You're right, I think you have to let you know.
I don't know.
I think you have to know. Don't worry about
Is it, does the letter start with K? Does the letter start with K?
We give us like 3 minutes.
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Just say it. You won't.
So,
it. She was there?
You won't
So
say
we
it?
have Josh.
Alright.
Oh my God, 61.
You won't say it.
You guys should do that when you're fine.
Huh?
I won't say.
Josh? Oh, what?
Well, I guess you're not even.
Alex, I really don't even know.
Alyssa.
That's why I didn't pick that one.
Oh,
Want me to ask Mr. Lee?
I think that's rushing.
I'm sorry, what?
Should I ask Mr.
I
Lee?
think that's.
Oh,
Yeah, you should.
yeah.
Sure.
Because they're on the group,
Mr.
they're
Lee.
right there.
What is number 4
Yeah.
talking about?
Which one is number 4?
They're all on a group.
Which one are you asking about?
It says, which version of events is most.
Okay, so remember at the very end, Van Ness and Pendleton both had versions of events, being that they were the seconds. Who do you believe more?
Alyssa.
Van Ness was Burr's guy.
Yeah.
Pendleton is Hamilton's guy.
Yeah.
Who do you think was more accurate in what happened? Like at the end, it ended up being, well, which one was telling the truth? Is it a mixture of both? Is it one guy seemingly had a better grasp on things and the other guy didn't? Like, which way are you going?
All right. So,
Yeah.
Alex, did you hear that, or would you like me to repeat it? You basically said
There we go.
that, who totally better stuff, Ness or
Thanks,
Pendleton?
Alyssa.
It was more truthful than what they said actually happened. Ness is, the guy I was referring to.
I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, here's Mr. Lee.
All right, so you
Mommies
have
are mommies.
two guys that are serving as seconds. Okay, they're backing up somebody. All right. Van Ness is the guy that's backing up Burr. Okay, he's the one that's kind of there to observe for Aaron Burr, make sure everything goes correctly. Pendleton's the guy that is there for Hamilton. So they are the eyewitnesses. They're the only ones. Okay? When it all goes down, both of them have a version that they tell to a newspaper. Out of the two of them, is it Van Ness or Pendleton or a mixture of both that you believe the most? So how do we get the story straight?
I'll be like,
Who do you believe more?
You're like, pop, pop, pop.
Okay.
This girl.
Thank you.
This girl, you're like, knock it out.
Are we gonna go over these?
Hello.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Michael, you should do
Yes.
Lunch is in like 6
Yeah.
We ain't having Christmas.
Lunch is when I say it is, Miss Jasper. Miss Jasper.
Don't pull one of those, because they'll just dismiss it. I do. Don't do that.
Oh, there is no bell. So you're right. So who dismisses you, Jasper?
No.
Who dismisses you? This guy right here. We the people. You're gonna pull the Constitution out? All right. All right. You got a minute. Hello, Miss Cash. I have you in stereo right here and through the speakers.
Yes, Leroy. Hi. How's your day going?
It's actually pretty good. I gotta tell you something. Hey guys. Come a little closer.
Dang, Randy. No.
How did I hear that? You were muted.
Hey, can you be quiet?
Okay, welcome back in, folks. Randy, you don't need your speakers on when you are physically sitting in my classroom.
All right, sorry, my bad.
Randy, calm down. All right, so you were asked a number of different questions, things like why did the duel happen and could it have been avoided? Those are obviously opinion-based questions, and I'll look forward to reading those in group. The main question that we need to answer are really kind of the main questions we need to answer are the ones at the end. And Randy has been kind enough to tell us the answer to his question. Did Burr mean to kill Hamilton? Is Burr a murderer? So Randy, go ahead and unmute and tell us what you think.
All right, I said murder because Ham agreed to the duel, and it's his fault because he was like super cocky, and you know if he actually would have tried harder, he might have won. So yeah, that's what I said.
So Randy is saying that Burr is not to blame here. He's not a murderer because Hamilton, on his own free will, participated. Any group or individual want to argue against that? Emma, go right ahead.
Okay, so I think that he is a murderer because, what? Anyways, I think that he is a murderer because if you take a human life, no matter like for what reason, you're a murderer. Yeah. Why are you looking at me like that? What? What? You were looking at me. Okay.
Okay, we're going to give Emma a pass on that just because Megan Carroll was being distracting. Yeah, Megan, I'll call you out, Megan.
Not even.
Anybody else?
I'll say what our group had to say.
I'm
Is
sorry.
that okay? Can I say what our group said?
Go ahead.
I think Lexi had this question, but we said Burr was a murderer because they did it in New Jersey, and in New Jersey, the state got to decide whether he was a murderer or not, and they decided that he was.
Okay, so does it matter at this point as to whether or not Burr is held as a murderer? And this goes, it links to our other question about the version, okay? Some of the groups were asking during the breakout sessions about the fourth question, which version of events is most believable? Because keep in mind, there are two versions of event. And this all comes back to the idea that the duels that are fought actually have a code. And as you were reading, you noticed the term, the code duello. This is an old Latin term talking about how when you are going to fight a duel, there is a step-by-step procedure that you have to follow, all right? And basically what this all germinated from is that Hamilton is accused of calling Burr despicable, which I know is just a cute little movie now about minions, but back in the 1700s, that was a huge insult. Because despicable described the gunk that was on the bottom of your shoe that you would scrape off after walking through the city streets that were filled with human and animal fecal matter, mud, all kinds of other waste and garbage and whatever else. And so when you would get home, you would take a metal rod and scrape that stuff off the bottom of your shoe or boot. And that was called despicable. So he was calling Burr a despicable person. That's a very low insult. Now, did Hamilton say it? Hamilton denied of saying that directly. Okay, this is classic Hamilton. Hamilton is going to deny that he says it without really denying it. So what can we surmise is that Hamilton totally said this. He said it out loud in a toast, which means everybody's paying attention to him. He's holding up a glass of wine or champagne or something, and he is toasting, talking about how this despicable man, Aaron Burr, should never be governor of New York. So Burr basically says, because of that insult, he feels like that skewed public opinion against him, and that's why he lost the election. Now, there's no way you can really prove it, but that's where this all comes from. So Burr, of course, demands satisfaction, and according to Code Duello, as soon as I challenge you, you have the right to accept or not. Now, if Hamilton says no, Burr gets to say, look, he's not even a man. You know, he's somebody that's running away from the challenge. If Hamilton says yes, then Hamilton basically gets to choose what they're going to do. Now, they don't have to fight with guns. Believe it or not, Hamilton can choose to use daggers. He can choose to use swords. He can, of course, choose to use a gun. He can use a rifle if he wanted to, okay? Or they can just use fists. So they literally could just show up and have a fist fight. In the end, he chooses guns because it's the most honorable thing to do. This is all about honor. Now, in modern day society, you might look at it and say this is really all about stupidity because Hamilton, of course, we know, ends up dying. But this was, again, all about honor. If you don't show up and you don't show that you are manly, then it's a problem. It ruins a career. Now, Ellis points out that their careers are pretty much over by this point anyway. The Federalists are on their way out. Hamilton, being the leader of that ideology, is starting to fall into disfavor. And Burr's fallen into disfavor with Jefferson and, by extension, Madison, who don't trust him. Okay, so he doesn't really have a future in politics. So this is really an argument between two guys whose political careers are done. Okay, now the main question there was Joseph J. Ellis, and Joseph J. Ellis basically makes the argument that this duel was important because it is the only bloodshed of the Second American Revolution. Can anybody tell me what the Second American Revolution was that Ellis was talking about?
Civil War?
If the first American Revolution was actually fought on the fields against the British back in 1776, 1777, 78, all the way up to 1783, did anybody pick up what Ellis's argument is the Second American Revolution? Nobody in here either? Was it the election? Is that what he's talking about? It's part of it. And Sierra is correct by saying, hey, is it the election? Because remember, we talked this week about the Revolution of 1800, okay? But the Revolution of 1800, the idea that Adams hands off power to Jefferson, and even though Adams is a Federalist and Jefferson is a Democratic Republican, and they are passing power between two political ideologies, what does that prove about the Constitution? That it works, okay? That we can have a peaceful transition of power. Now, this is topical, of course, now, because if you pick up the newspaper, if you, you're all too young to have even picked up a newspaper. What am I talking about? If you log on to the news, okay, if you kind of look at our current situation between, Trump and Biden, Their argument right now is all about a transition team. Does Biden get, foreign policy briefings? Does he get the COVID updates? Does he get everything that Trump is getting? Because in just a few short weeks, Biden will be sworn in as president of the United States, at least as it stands now. So Biden is saying, hey, my transition needs to occur so that we have a peaceful transfer of power between the Republicans and the Democrats. And what do they keep on referring to? They keep on referring to peaceful transitions like the election of 1800, okay? Where you have Adams believing one extreme, you have Jefferson believing the other, and they still pass off power without incident, okay? The only bloodshed, Hamilton. Because remember, Hamilton is the embodiment of the Federalist Party. Hamilton dying in 1803 in a duel is very much indicative of what occurs to the Federalist Party. Now, it takes a while. It takes about a decade, but during the War of 1812, the Federalists pretty much signed their death warrant with the Hartford Convention. And if you have not watched that presentation, now you have a homework assignment. You need to get on that, okay? The main thing is that we need to discuss and understand is Ellis correct in that mentality? Now, for those of you taking the AP exam, this is the kind of skill we have to develop throughout the year. You have to develop this mentality. You have to understand that historians are going to make an argument.
We're going to lunch. Bye.
Thanks, Sapphire. You have to understand. Yes, the AP students in the other room are so dedicated. They can't hang on for 1 minute.
It's lunchtime too.
We have to leave, V. See you later. It's not our choice.
Bye.
Mentality here.
Out.
Guys, stop. The AP mentality is that a
This is T's pregnant hungry. We have to.
Then go. The AP mentality is that the argument has been made by a historian. Do you believe it, and can you argue with it or against it utilizing your historical analysis? So this is something we're going to be working on throughout the school year. Okay? For the remainder of the year, we've got to work on that skill because we've worked on primary sources, but we have not worked on historical analysis. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, you need to, you want to hang back, that's totally fine. If you have any concerns, you can always email or come into office hours. Thank you for swinging by. Make sure to submit your quiz. Make sure to submit your answers from your groups, and please make sure that you're hopping on your journals, which are due on Monday. So don't forget, journals due on Monday. Have a good one, folks.